We all know that the late royal Princess Margaret was a huge fan of pop culture. She liked to go to everything that was hip and swinging at the right place at the right time, starting really, when you think about it, with the dance bands of the late 1940s. Of course, throughout the 50s she was seen at all the most respectable nightclubs, smoking, drinking, staying out till late, and as we told you recently, the late Queen Mary was less than impressed with this particular behaviour. But of course, Princess Margaret really did have her own temper, her own thoughts. She decided who was in and who was out of her inner circle. No two ways about that, let me tell you. Now, for this popular group, well, they managed to cross the late princess very, well, shall we say, unsavoury. And this resulted in her publicly saying she never wanted to hear from them again. As ever, let me explain. June 1965, one of Princess Margaret's favourite bands of the moment, yes, indeed, the fabulous Beatles. Well, it was announced that they were going to become MBEs, travelling, of course, to the world-famous Buckingham Palace and picking up the award in that October. It was a big year for those, really, because, of course, they'd had phenomenal success, first appearing in a royal variety show alongside Marlene Dietrich way back in 1963. But by 1965, they'd truly become respectable. So respectable, in fact, that Princess Margaret, a little like a few decades later with Princess Diana, could often be heard playing the Beatles' latest tunes and albums. She truly did enjoy their music, as so many people did at the height of the 60s. But what was fascinating about this particular story, as one would imagine, is she, of course, rode the crest of a wave, Beatlemania. She was absolutely thrilled, as were the rest of the British monarchy, of literally how well the exportation of the Mersey sound, the Mersey beat, was doing. Let's not forget, really, in a very short space of time, John, Paul, Ringo and George had truly changed the world of music around the world. They were so popular. Everybody wanted to know all about the Beatles, and wherever she went, Princess Margaret was asked, what was John Lennon like? Now, it was said that John Lennon developed something of a crush on Princess Margaret, and that really does kind of stack up, because similarly, he did develop a crush on another 60s singer, Alma Cogan, and for a period they looked very scarily alike. I'll leave you to work that one out. Now, what happened was, in October of that year, they popped along to Buckingham Palace to pick up their awards, and everybody apparently was thrilled. You see, John Lennon, though, had a sort of, shall we say, penchant for making things up. He claimed that they decided to smoke a spliff, a joint, inside Buckingham Palace because they were so nervous, inside the gents, that is. Years later, George Harrison refuted this and said, look, John simply made it up. Now, Brian Epstein, their manager, was over the moon. This was respectability with a capital R. He couldn't believe it, that his boys from Liverpool had come all the way in a few short years, seemingly now to become, well, huge global stars, with, of course, the added dose of royalty thrown on top. Everything went rather swimmingly. Now, a few people claim, in the latter years, and I've met Sir Paul McCartney and Sir Ringo Starr. Now, they basically have said they were always thrilled to receive the award, but John felt apparently a little bit uneasy with his working class background. He didn't necessarily believe people from his background would naturally pick up an award. But nonetheless, he took it back to his Aunt Mimi's and she proudly displayed it. That was until 1969. In 1969, everything changed. He was then hooked up with, of course, Yoko Ono. And because of their, shall we say, political leanings, he decided to take it back. So he went back to his Aunt Mimi's in Bournemouth and decided to take it back and post it to the palace. This caused absolute outrage. Not more so, though, than inside Kensington Palace, where Princess Margaret decided she'd had enough. After all, she'd supported the Beatles for years. How on earth, how insulting to her elder sister to return it. It really was something of a, well, bombshell in the news, let me tell you. And from that day on, Princess Margaret binned all of her Beatles records, never wanted to hear them again, and very rarely spoke of any of the Beatles. Of course, as time marched on, she herself naturally relented and was very sad at the early demise of John Lennon, basically claiming that he was something of a character. That was the kindest thing she could actually say in the latter part. Interesting, isn't it, to see how you can go from hero to zero, even in the eyes of a royal. Seemingly, even she felt they couldn't work it out. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.